Next class is on Western tradition of the St. Thomas tradition. We have already studied the Malabar tradition of the St. Thomas tradition, and also we studied the Saint Bartholomew tradition. Now we are studying Western tradition of the St. Thomas tradition. According to this tradition, St. Thomas came to India through the well established land trade route, reached India sometime in the middle of the first century. In Malabar tradition, we studied that St. Thomas used sea route to reach India, but according to the Western tradition, he came to India through the well established land trade route, reached India by the middle of the first century. So you can see the well established land trade route here with red color in this map. And he preached the gospel in Parthia and India and converted many to Christianity, including the members of royal families. And finally, he suffered martyrdom in India and was buried in India. This is what St. Thomas tradition or the Western tradition in St. Thomas tradition. And later his mortal remains were transferred to the west, a place called Edessa, where they were deposited, his mortal remains, and paying due respect and venerated. According to the Acts of Thomas, one of the apocryphal writings, apostles divided the regions of the world by lot, and Thomas was given India as his field of work. Thomas complained that a man with his Jewish background could not evangelize the Indians. But the Lord himself intervened in that situation, and he met Abenes, one of the officers of an Indian king called Gundaforus, who was searching for an architect to take back with him to his master. And this Abenes introduced Thomas to the king as the architect. So Thomas came to India to build a palace for an Indian king called Gundaforus. And he came with a person, one of the officials of King Gundaforus, named Abenes. Evidences for Western tradition. There are plenty of evidences put forward by the propagators of this tradition. The Didascalia Apostolorum, or the teachings of the apostles, written in Edessa around AD 250, points India as the field of activity of Judas Thomas. The Acts of Thomas, an apocryphal writing, perhaps written about the middle of the 3rd century, mention about the coming of Judas Thomas to India. The Acts of Thomas further speaks that the slain body of Thomas being taken from India to Edessa, where it was buried, and the observance of July 3rd as the day of Thomas' martyrdom started. So July 3rd is observed as the St. Thomas Day because that day was considered as the day of Thomas' martyrdom. Saint Ephraim, Saint Gregory of Nazianzus, Saint Ambrose, and Saint Jerome connect Saint Thomas with India. Saint Jerome in AD 390, in one of his letters, mentioned like this: he was with Saint Thomas in India, with Peter in Rome, and with Paul at Illyricum. So, in one of the writings of Saint Jerome, he mentioned like this: he was with Saint Thomas in India, with Peter in Rome, and with Paul at Illyrism. So this is a clear evidence of Thomas' ministry in India. Saint Ephraim, 308 to 373, in his historical sermons and poems, describes the apostolic work and death of St. Thomas in India. Saint Ambrose of Milan, 333 to 397, said with the knowledge about India based on the accounts of travelers as well as the Greek and Latin classics, he wrote like this: even those kingdoms which were shut out by rugged mountains became accessible to them, as India to Thomas and Persia to Matthew. So this is the account of travelers, or this is the account of Saint Ambrose of Milan based on the travelers and as well as the Greek and Latin classics. He wrote like this: even those kingdoms which were shut out by rugged mountains became accessible to them, as India to Thomas and Persia to Matthew. Gregory, 538 to 593, the Bishop of Tours, in his book In Gloria Matridum, mentioned that St. Thomas became a martyr in India and his remains were taken to Edessa and buried. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle refers to the tradition of St. Thomas and St. Bartholomew's apostolate in India. Mar Solomon, a Nestorian bishop, in 1222 mentioned about St. Thomas' tradition in his Book of the Bee. He also mentioned that Haban, the merchant, brought his body and laid it in Edessa. Marco Polo, the Venetian traveler, gives an account of his visit to the site of the tomb of St. Thomas in 1292. John of Monte Carvino, a Franciscan, visited Mylapore at the same time as Marco Polo visited and speaks of a church of St. Thomas in Mylapore. In 1324, Odoric and John de Marignoli give account of Christians in having St. Thomas tradition. John de Marignoli wrote about his travels through the areas of India occupied by the St. Thomas Christians. According to him, the pepper gardens and were masters of the public steelyard, which were as per a grant by the local king. So John de Marignoli wrote about his travels through the areas of India occupied by the St. Thomas Christians. And he wrote like this: the pepper gardens and the Christians were masters of the public steelyard, which were as per a grant by the local king. Issues with Western tradition. The major weakness of the Western tradition is about the authenticity of the Acts of Thomas. There are evidences for the existence of a king called Gundaphorus. Since 1834, numerous coins were found from Punjab and in Afghanistan bearing his name in Greek on one side and in Pali on the other side. But the evidences to prove his rule does not help in any way to prove the ministry of St. Thomas either in the area where Gundaphorus ruled or during his period. So there is a remaining doubt about the authenticity or validity of the contents of the book Acts of Thomas. Thank you.